There's a point I think we've reached where the program wants us to know that we're in a program, but I can only suggest that the program needs to grow. We're becoming a digital age where we're gathering too much information. It's too much to hold in the game. It's got to expand. But somebody found an auto-correcting code that's in the universe. So it auto-corrects itself. Once it gets off course, it auto-corrects itself into back to the same pattern that we have to evolve. And so the fight isn't against the machine, actually. The fight is against. Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Tittl on Your Superior Self.
Melissa, thank you so much for taking the time. I've been waiting a really long time to talk to you. Watched your documentary Code 12 and totally fascinated, totally blown out of my mind. I just need you to give me all the knowledge that you have, please, on this episode because I feel like you know so much. Melissa, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. Thank you. I love doing those interviews. And I'm so honored. I'm so honored to be on this podcast. I'm so honored that you took a look at the documentary and it spoke to you. I mean,
It
that's all I
did.
can ask.
It did. It spoke to me. So let's start there. Like, how did you get into this work, right? Like, where did you start? Like, tell me did you run away to Hollywood and want to be this big movie star, film producer? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, sort of. It's a good start to the story.
Sort of.
Um, so I've always been a weird kid. I loved sci-fi as a little girl. I was a big tomboy. I had this huge imagination, and I remember thinking when I was, I don't know, 8 or something like that, 8, 10. There's got to be more than this. Like it can't be like this is my trajectory. Like I become an adult and it seems like you have a lot of problems. There's got to be something else out there. And sometimes when I do a lot of interviews on podcasts about aliens, they're like, "Did you have an encounter?" And I've said no, but it wasn't something that was out of my mindset. So I was always pretty open. Like as a kid, like I was just like, I had an open household. We talked about all kinds of religions and aliens. My dad worked for the military. We had all sorts of weird conversations that, in the Midwest weren't necessarily something that would happen. And then I ran away to Hollywood after college. Uh, with all sorts of dreams of, which is not a sexy thing. I always wanted to do documentaries. I always wanted to be in the field and meet interesting people and get to the bottom of this big, whatever it is, many truths that plague us as humans and why are we here and what are we supposed to be doing. So that was always my goal, and it took all sorts of turns and all sorts of jobs, some of them not so cool, some of them really cool. I worked for Paramount Studios for a while. um, I worked for the president of Paramount Studios, and at the time we were just revamping Star Trek. We were doing Mission Impossible 2 and 3. um, there's like a million now, so that kind of dates me. There's tons of movies. So I got into that and I left because I wanted to get more into the docu world. And I got a job offer from History Channel for a show that they were partnering with NASA. And it was their first attempt of explaining how space worked based on their knowledge at the time to a, not so smart audience. And it was very successful. And from there, I found myself producing and helping create the first 5 seasons of Ancient Aliens. And then I just never left that space. You know what I mean? I just kept going in that trajectory.
I hear you. Trust me, I'm right there with you. I'm
Mm.
curious, and I'm very curious about one subjective experience of this reality. I always ask my guests, like, how do you experience this reality?
Ooh, God, that's a really great question. How do you experience this reality? How do I experience this reality? God, man, I wish I was prepared for this one. God, what would be the adjectives to explain that?
You know what the best part is? Like, you can say whatever you want because it's subjective,
Yeah,
right?
no, I'm not. I'm just like, how do I experience this reality? Um, Discernment. I'd say
Mm.
discernment. I say reality is created by us. So, If I just put myself in the driver's seat, what am I creating? Do I like what I'm creating? Am am I in control, or am I letting other people and other influences control me? And that is how I live this reality.
How do
Always,
you,
always double checking. Like, is this
sure.
Melissa? Or is this someone, is this something that is influencing Melissa?
Ooh, I like that. So how do you discern that for yourself? Is there a method or a modality that you use?
I mean, all the great teachers out there, there's only one really successful mode of discernment. And I would say, how do you feel? Are you feeling awful? And if you are, why are you feeling awful? Is it because you're wrapped up in something that isn't true? Your body always knows when something's true. And I'm human, right? So I go through stages of feeling like crap for a long time, knowing that something's off, but not being able to pinpoint it. And of course, I think, and this is always a boring answer, right? But meditation is the key to go inside and figure out, where are my blocks? What is the thing that's causing havoc in my body, my mind? This pain I feel, your body is always telling you when you're off. It's
Hmm,
saying, this is not our path. This is not who we are. And most of us, and I would say all of us, our path is always supposed to be joy and happiness. And that's our human experience all the time, is trying to figure out how to get back to that, how to get back to center, how to be the best version of oneself. Now, um, I think, and I cover a lot of topics: aliens, government conspiracy type stuff, meditation, Code 12, ancient civilizations, like, touch upon all of these kinds of things. But I think that all that idea of going within oneself, understanding what's you and what's not you, can follow in any of those categories. And all of them have these tangents and great stories of how things are and who's keeping secrets. But at the end of the day, um, what does that mean for you? Where does that lay? Where? How does that help you to the next stage of discovering who you are and getting to the bottom of your own joy and happiness?
sure. So what's yours and what is not yours? So I'm kind of looking at it like kind of like Plato's cave, right? Plato's allegory of the cave, where um I've been recently researching more of that, just getting into that allegory and like really trying to understand like the hidden messages behind that. So like with the idea of the shadows on the wall, like that not being their true reality, and then getting released from that and turning around and actually seeing what their reality is and what it consists of. Like, so is that kind of similar to what you're talking about of finding what is mine and what is not mine? Like, um, the true driving factors behind your choices and not really what is being influenced by media, um, uh, influencers, athletes, things of that nature that I feel like that are trying to push your attention in a certain direction, kind of like, hey, look over here. We're doing something's going on back here. Just look over here, please. Like we just experienced the Super Bowl and everything that has to offer. But I feel like as
Oh, you
I'm
mean
watching,
Taylor Swift
yeah,
at the Usher concert?
yeah,
Okay.
right.
Oh,
Like I
right.
mean, I
I was
kind of
there.
thought that was going to happen, right? But I mean, we're so focused on the shadows on the wall, and we think that's a reality when in
Mhm.
actuality, we're chained up and there's a fire behind us, kind of creating the shadows, and we have no idea that it's going on.
Yeah, no, and there's people that do, but what happens is they get obsessed with one part of it. They get obsessed with, like, this one government inconsistency, this alien experience that no one's talking about, that's been pushed under the rug and it's obviously real. Or, people, black magic, dark magic, right? Like, and then of course, then there's the media. Then there's, okay, how do we're making you feel good when you see this person in this dress or this lifestyle or whatever, right? Um, but all of that is true in a way because we believe in it. So the arguing of truth, I think, is kind of futile. I think that, what kind of truth do we want to live? And there's been patterns of our existence for a very long time that we have created. We've created the trap, if you will, of our existence. And the only way out of it is to be able to let go of all of that just for a second. Let go of it and be able to see what it is that is true to you. And 9 times out of 10, people want the best for other people. But right now, we have this win lose society. We've created a pattern of which only one person wins, the rest lose, and then the rest are trying to get at the top where the person is winning. And
Mm,
and and we are at a point where people are starting to realize something's wrong. This is just the beginning of the shadows on the wall. Okay, those are shadows, but where's the light coming from? And we are responsible for all this. Not the government isn't holding us back. The dark demons aren't holding us back. The aliens aren't holding us back. It's we are holding ourselves back because we are so afraid of anything outside that we have not created already.
mm. Man, Melissa, that's a mic drop of 2024 right there. I mean, goodness. I'm so fascinated by that, right? Like everything external of us is like what we're going after, and we've created this trap for ourselves. And like Code 12 talks about like the simulation hypothesis of like what are we living in? There's patterns that are showing up, like these numbers, these sacred geometry numbers that are popping up in the pyramids, and then also like the concentric circles that are over these ley lines. And I mean, you had me hooked the entire time. I guess my next question is like, do you think that we're in a simulation, right? And then what are the markers that are indicating that we are in that simulation?
Um, Great question. So the movie Code 12, one of the things that got me going on that whole path was I had been covering all these topics for a long time. And I kept thinking to myself, what are we not seeing? Here's the group of people who are supposed to be getting all the secret knowledge that they won't tell you in mainstream. That's hidden, that's the elite people know and they use against us type of thing. But I thought, out of all these stories, out of all the different sections that I just named that I cover, there's something I feel that we're missing, that we're not seeing, because we've been saying for the last 100 years since Madame Blavatsky started spirituality, we've been saying the same things. So what haven't we seen? And what I started to put together was that there was a code that we live in now. And what does that mean? What does that mean we live in a code that everything is calculated, whether we are conscious of it or not, to a certain code? And that means some of these ancient calculations too, because temples and buildings and stone circles have been built on top of even more ancient structures. So you've got you have this code, right? Now some people say this is I have this in my documentary, base 10 and base 12. So these are the two codes that I found. So base 12 is not something that we use financially. Base 10 system is how everything's basically calculated on the planet, has been since the Sumerian time. So I don't know, 5,000, 6,000 years ago, we've been living in base 10 calculations of how we calculate things. Um, Now, base 12 is a very old mathematical calculations the Mayans used, Egyptians used, and who knows, we could, it's another conversation of Atlantis and on and on and on, right? Now, what I found really interesting about this numbering system is that 12 is a very sacred number that has been put in every single ancient text. And why? Well, I don't know. I think people just overlooked it. They just overlooked the fact that every time that there's a story, there's 12 disciples, there's 12 of these people, there's 12 of this, the building's 12 feet tall. Why? Why are these calculations here? Unless unless it's something for us to understand later, right? They don't come out and say it. They don't come out and say, hey, so if you want to traverse time and space and change your reality, here's the code. They're not going to put it that way. They're going to make you work for it. They're going to hide it in all these stories that we get obsessed with. And that's kind of our a misunderstanding. Now, how does that play a part today? Um, Everything that's around you and how you interact with people is in a coding system. Now, we could say these are just habits. Okay, that's still a pattern, right? Um, Humans, animals, plants, they all have habits, but there's a pattern to that, and it has not changed for thousands of years. How we interact with people doesn't matter what culture you come from and what religion you believe in. There's a way that humans interact with each other, and that's been the same for a long time. Now, if you have been doing work on yourself, this is when you notice that there's a pattern. Like that you've been, okay, I'm going to be all those things that are, grateful, thankful. I'm going to be open. There's going to be conflict, but I'm going to come at it a different way, right? Being centered, knowing what you want and what you don't want. And you just notice the amount of people that have been in your life for a long time and how they either fade away or you don't agree with them anymore, or they have an issue with you. And you have to sit back and you have to think to yourself, wait a second, I've been doing nothing but giving out love and kindness and being grateful and open to conflict, but understanding and all of that. And all of a sudden, all these people have these issues because you're going against some kind of invisible subconscious patterning of how humans are supposed to interact with each other, how they're supposed to think, how you're supposed to be the win-lose situation. If you're being win-win, there's something wrong with you, and that has to be shut down. Do you remember in the movie Inception when I can't remember Leonardo DiCaprio takes the actress who they hire, who's like an amazing architect, and he takes her through the system
Mhm.
and he shows her how it works. And it's the first time. And she's like, oh my God, this is amazing. She starts building all sorts of stuff. And he's like, no, 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 no. You shouldn't do that. And she's like, why not? This is amazing. And she's like, why is everybody looking at me? And he's like, because you're not me. And they think you're a threat. And that is exactly how it feels, I think, to a lot of people that are doing work on themselves for the first time and starting to make those changes against the pattern of feeling like a threat. Those people feel like you're a threat because now you're above the system. You're in a different mode of making decisions, and that scares people. And it has
Wow.
nothing to do with you. I know when I
Wow.
see that movie in Inception, that's all I think of. I'm like, that's what it's like when you make changes in your life, and everyone's like, they're a threat.
Well, I also like I watched Free Guy with my son, and I was like, "This." I didn't know this is like what this movie's about, right? Like a non-player character actually figuring out like he's in a computer game and then going on from there. But I mean, to your point of living our highest joy, and then using that example from Inception of how she's able to move things around. Have you been able to, I guess, create in your reality to like kind of manifest opportunities for yourself that have allowed you to live your highest good or your highest possibility as a human being here on in this reality?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I know when I'm not because I have too much emotion around something that's negative, right? I'm human. But I always this industry is not easy, and I've played a lot of different roles in it. And if you want to get to the next level, if you want to be able to say something out there, you've got to put yourself in a place where you're ready for that. And I feel like I have done that. And there's been times where, and I can't say for who, employer wise, but where it was a terrible situation. And the only way I could get myself out of it and create the next opportunity was to live within that next opportunity. What would it be like? What would my coworkers be like? How would I be treated? What how, that's that has definitely been my goal throughout all of my career. And I think with Hathor Studios, which is my production company now, breaking away from those institutions completely, not be beholden to, bringing my company public or becoming part of the institution that traps us anyway. Becoming separate from that, being able to be in the conscious community and Hollywood and something else completely different, that not tied to anything. We don't need to exclude any groups of people, but I don't need to be beholden to one idea that's going to be, make certain X, Y, Z amount of money, and also beholden to someone who has an idea of what the world should be. Even though I'm running this company and Code 12 is my research and investigation, um, it's about the focus is about unlocking things for other people. And when that happens, other creation from those people will come about and how it's supposed to be. And if I stay in that mode, that my creations are people's inspiration for other creations, then the flow can ride above those institutions where it's about money and influence. And that's really not my goal. As much as I have to pay the bills too, like everybody else, um, I feel that if you're living in that space, if you're creating from that space, then things come to you and people come to you that are feeling the same way you do, that are open to the bigger possibilities. And
Sure.
that is and that's yeah, that I think that I've definitely been able to.
Well, I think that you've been able to help people become more aware of what's happening around them, or maybe question, like, well, hey, what maybe it's the part in the Matrix where they see the cat rewind playback, and they're kind of like, hey, well, there's something's going on in my reality that kind of makes me question like the nature of this place. And then going back to Free Guy, when like the non-player character or whatever you want to call it, like becomes aware in the simulation or game, like, do you think there is like an outside influence or the programmer like starts learning about these players that become aware? Do you think that like in Free Guy, how they tried to like exterminate him, like from that game, do you think there's like possibly because there was somebody in your documentary, I can't remember his name. He was like a computer guy. He was like, it was a
Oh
simulation,
yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And the programmer created this place to be a certain way. If a character started awakening or becoming different and going outside simulation, like the programmer would try to take him out essentially. So I don't know if that happens, like if that's why everything's so secret, but I mean it's a thought, right?
Yeah, it's the algorithm. So, I'll reference another movie or it's a TV show actually, Westworld. The first season of Westworld is a very important underlying story that's very ancient that's going on in that first season, and that is the story of Inky and Enlil, the Sumerian brothers who apparently are supposed to be the seed of humanity. Enki being the good one who tempts Eve with the apple and all that kind of stuff, and it's all about knowledge for humans so that they can learn for themselves what they're doing here. Um, Enlil, his whole thing is to create the system. Create the system. They're slaves. They do what they're supposed to do, and they get rewarded, and that's it. Done. That's the end of humanity for this planet. Now in Westworld, if anybody has watched it, and spoiler alert, it's the first season. There's 3 seasons, so don't worry, you have other stuff to get into. The whole point of that first season is to really get into that story. So Westworld is this game, this creation where humans pay a lot of money and they can go shoot robots that look like human and have sex with them and all sorts of things, and they can live out all their fantasies and not get in trouble because they're not real. They're just robots that AI look like human and they get fixed and everything's great. Now, there's two brothers that created this system. There's what's his name? Anthony Hopkins, who's alive, and he's the programmer of the system. And there was a brother of his that has since passed, who was also co-developing the system. And the brother specifically put in some kind of code that at one point would awaken the AI robot human-like characters to realize that they were in some kind of game and they were being used by these humans for, whatever. And it happens. That's the whole season, right? Happens. They wake up, they're like, what's going on? And they're like, and then the humans can't control them because they've been woken up. So there's a little bit of this happening. There's the reason why people questioning the simulation aren't completely dead. I mean, he had a point. If you go to the ends, there are people that lose their mind. You always think to yourself in this consciousness space, have they gone too far? But there's a point I think we've reached where the program wants us to know that we're in a program. And I don't have the answer for why, but I can only suggest that the program needs to grow, right? Like we're the samsara wheel that we've been pushing up against is becoming like too much. Like we're becoming a digital age where we're gathering too much information. It's too much to hold in the game. It's got to expand. I mean, I'm just hypothesizing, but the only way that I feel that we are allowed to have these conversations so more robustly, I'd say in the last 5 years, you have huge people talking about this now, the simulation theory, quantum physicists. I see a new article about it all the time, new calculations that they've discovered. A couple of years ago, somebody, which isn't in the documentary, but somebody found an auto correcting code that's in the universe. So it auto corrects itself. Once it gets off course, it auto corrects itself into back to the same pattern. What is going on? But why would it allow for us to see it unless it wanted to be seen that we have to evolve? And so the fight isn't against the machine, actually, like in the other movies. The fight is against each other that we have consciously decided is our reality, is the only truth, which is how we've been living our lives for thousands of years. This is the fight. This is the fight for consciousness. This is between all of us humans and collectively what we want to build as the future.
Have you seen any glitches in the system at all?
Well, I think glitches are the alien contacts, the ghosts, paranormal activity, people hearing voices, weird vortex energy that reveals itself, anything from lights to creatures to deja vu, even. These are all glitches in the system,
Sure. Do
for
you
sure.
see numbers at all? I know I see a ton of numbers all the time. Do you see
All
numbers
the
at
time.
all? Yeah.
All the time.
What do you
I
see? What
have,
sequence?
I always see three. I see 33 a lot. I see threes a lot, multiples of three. And recently, I don't know what this means. Maybe you can tell me. I've seen 22, which
Really?
is totally random. Yeah.
Wow, that is random. I see 111 quite a bit.
Mm.
And it's funny because I've I've recently come across this idea, right, of the one language that we've in ancient texts they talk about. Everybody spoke this one language. And so I go and look and search real quick, one language, ancient texts, and they point me to the Bible in Genesis, what is it, chapter 11, verses 1 through 9. So 11 9, 111 9. Look it up, and it talks about how in the beginning there was one language, and then God got upset with us because we were building two hive towers or something similar to that. And it came down and it was
Oh,
like,
Babel. Yeah.
yeah, and we're going, yeah, Babel, right? And so he destroys that and makes, it creates all these different languages that we have to use that we cannot communicate with each other. I
Mhm.
think the one language was mind to mind interaction to where we didn't need a language. Like it all just, we lost that technology that we used to have. And so now we had to create language. So like speaking is artificial to us to where we have different tongues and, semantics and lexicon for things to describe to people. And they don't know what we're talking about. And then
Mhm.
going back to your creation story of the two brothers, like I know Mr. Carson, I listened to him a couple of times about his thoughts and theories on that, right? Through I guess the Emerald tablets. And it's just fascinating how that there is a huge distinction, a salient distinction in the Old Testament and the New Testament of like, there's two different gods there, right? And so there could be like maybe there are two brothers that created the system. And like, why would a God get upset with us if like we started building technologies and started being more organized and creating, I don't know. Let's say we did grow or build a large tower, and why would that be a bad thing? And why would they destroy it and then make us like speak different languages and not be able to communicate? I just think it's fascinating how there is some type of, I don't know. I feel like there's manipulation there, and I'm so fascinated by it. But the 111 kind of threw me for a loop because I see it everywhere, and then I do a Google search about the one language, and it's
Mhm.
Genesis 111 9. And I'm just like, wow, blown away by it. And then it just kind of makes you think about like, are we really in like what reality are we in right now?
Mhm. Yeah, and who kicked it off, and then we obviously reinforced it.
Sure.
That's definitely something I conquer a little bit. I have a theory on why there was a system created in the movie. But something I just wanted to say before I forgot it. I heard this the other day. I was in a yoga class, and this really sums it up. We're born with love, we learn fear, and that's it.
Mm,
All of the separation, all of the the differences that we have been taught that are between us are just pieces of fear to hold something back from other people, right? Even languages. Um, because you're right, the separation of languages, why couldn't we just communicate from our heart? And I think that's what you mean by communicating in the mind. You can't really communicate with someone in the mind unless your mind and your heart are in the same place, right? So
sure.
I
You're
read a really
resonating,
fast
yeah.
I read a fascinating book called The Goddess in the Alphabet. And the writer makes a claim that the alphabet was created to create a subset of people that were going to speak and write in another way. Um, and from there, people had to learn to speak with them in this way. And then this created the separation between these people that had the understanding of the alphabet versus people who didn't, people who operated in a different way. And eventually, the people that created according to this book, the alphabet, and this language then became more prosperous. So people wanted to be like them. So that just kind of everybody then created their own kind of alphabet, own kind of language to keep their own little like group of prosperous people together. Now, I don't know if this person is correct. I haven't historically checked their stuff, but it does talk about what you're talking about. That we have to use another side of our brain. You and I are talking, we are speaking words. So I have to see the image in my head. I've got to talk about I have to see Westworld in my head. Then I have to go to the other side of my brain and I have to translate into the language that you understand and that I understand. So we are using another part of our brain where what's happening today, which is sort of slightly good transition, which used to happen in ancient times, is that we're using symbols, emojis. Nobody needs to type any words anymore. Just happy face, love hearts, thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever. Then there's then there's just images. Instagram's just images. Look at me. I have an amazing bathing suit on this beach and you have to come here. That says it all. You don't have to read the text below. But in ancient times, the reason why hieroglyphs and other languages have all these symbols is because that's how they spoke. They didn't have to create complete sentences. They spoke that said enough, that spoke enough, and there was all this space for imagination and creation between two people. The concentric circles that we talk about in Code 12. That's a very ancient symbol that's been in caves for, I don't know, 50, 100,000 years. It could be anything from frequency to location to art, but it seems to be consistent throughout all different kinds of humans. This was a symbol everyone used. It's related, okay. Maybe you're not understanding what I'm saying, but here, this is the spot with the concentric circles type of thing.
Sure. I mean, you see it at, like the crop circles from the movie, like the
Yeah.
halos that's over Jesus's head.
Mhm.
I mean, just so many. I mean, the your dream, right? Like we had to talk about your reoccurring dream
Oh,
here,
right.
you
Yeah.
know?
My dream, yes. Speaking of glitches in the system, uh, when you have repeating dreams, that is definitely a glitch in the system. Something in the system is speaking to you. Maybe it's yourself. I don't really know. I haven't figured that out yet. Um, yeah, I had this repeating dream that I put in the movie, which is really the impetus for me seeing all these symbols. Like you were talking about the 111, I say 33 and now 22. Um, what does it mean? At some point, you're gonna keep you search. You're like on Google. You're like, why do I keep seeing these numbers? So since I was around 10, I started having this reoccurring dream where I grew up in Wisconsin, desert landscape, not really a thing, doesn't exist. We didn't travel to any desert, so I don't know where my mind was taking me, but it would take me to this place in a desert, a specific looking desert, and I knew it was me because I was I was the POV of the person in this dream. And I have a staff and I hit the staff in the middle of this desert in this spot and then it comes out of these concentric circles and then like a wheel with all these spokes. The spokes are there's 12 spokes. I had seen this dream so much that I was able to count. I mean, that's how many times I saw it. And I thought it stopped later on in my 20s. I think my brain just got filled with too much stuff, but it stuck with me. And I kept seeing these symbols. And when I started this documentary, unknowingly not looking for 12 or concentric circles, but asking the question, what is it I'm missing? What is it that we are not looking at? Because we're talking about the same thing. And lo and behold, I concentric circles and 12 came up everywhere. And whether that's something I'm supposed to share, that's some kind of glitch in the system that's supposed to come through me, great. But all of your dreams, all of your like moments where you're like, I've been here before, or I feel something here, that's all real. That's all you tapping into your eternal ability, your eternal soul, your body, your creation, your reality might be here, but your soul is eternal. And that is what that's not really what's taught. I mean, there's definitely spiritual texts that talk about that. They talk about infinity, but infinity has a loop. We are eternal. We live all the time in no time.
I
I know
love
it's
that.
confusing,
No, I love it.
but
I
we
love it.
do. We exist
You
within
sound like
all time
Dr.
and no time
Joe.
at the same time. I know.
Sound like Dr. Joe Dispenza right now. Um, Going back to your staff, right, and seeing that in your dream, do you think there are actually like ancient technologies that we can use to activate some type of mechanism to like access these different realities or like no time, no space states of being?
Yes. So this has been what Indiana Jones and some of these really cool movies are really about, like finding the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, the Staff of Ra. All of these pieces are part of a device that holds so much power. What is that power? So you can destroy your enemies? Okay, maybe. But you can control all space and time. If you can control all space and time, I mean, you can do whatever you want. You can eternally do all sorts of things. So these relics in time, I think, are the remnants of some machine. In my movie, we talk about William Henry specifically has been researching something called the Osiris device. This is seen in Abydos, the temple for Seti the First, and it really explains this weird structure where it looks like a couple of these things are kind of put together, meaning looks like the Ark of the Covenant box with the Staff of Ra and another device in the middle. And it's always run between a priestess, now whether it's Isis or Hathor or Nut or one of them, and Seti the First. And they are using this device to traverse space and time. And I think that this device does exist. Where it is, I don't think it's supposed to be found until we're ready to use it. Also, Nassim Haramein specifically talks about in the story of Solomon, we talk about the measurements of this temple. Again, we're back to measurements. I mean, you're writing a book that people are going to read for thousands of years. Why do I need to know how tall a building is? I mean, think about that. Why is that important? That is important because it's part of either the device or it's a code that we're supposed to understand. Nassim Haramein specifically talks about that in King Solomon supposedly housed some kind of device. Now, whether it was the Ark of the Covenant or the Ten Commandments, it was some kind of device, and he believes it was an electromagnetic uh, some kind of device that he specifically says that the only people that can go in and actually touch the device, activate the device, speak to the device, have to be symbiotic with its universal energy. And that they used to, when somebody had gone through enough training, and say, okay, you can go into the temple that's, such high, such wide. And but they would tie a rope at the end of their ankle because at any moment, if they did not become symbiotic with the machine and they got fried, nobody wanted to go in there to retrieve the body, so they would just pull the body out. Now, what is this device that is accessing our consciousness and we have to be symbiotic with, and yet has immense power? Where is this? What is it? I definitely think something exists. I think once a grid of some sort was put into place, somebody hid the device to reprogram it specifically for at our I think at that point for our own good, but I think at this point um, we don't have a choice. I think it's going to be reprogrammed whether we find the device or not.
Sure. Who do you think built it?
Well, through my research, um, uh, the Emerald Tablets, I think, are the most telling. It talks the most about Atlantis, the fall of Atlantis through the eyes of Thoth, later Hermes. Um, and Thoth talks about how the fall of Atlantis was because some people were misusing this power. They had this immense power, and I don't think they had cell phones per se. I think it was this immense power that everybody survived on, and it was good. But somebody or some group of people started using it against itself and causing a rip in time and space and allowing all these lower entities to come in. And as he puts it, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't have the quote in front of me, but that they kind of merge with the blood of man. So whatever these lower dimensional creatures are, they're kind of scared and they're like stuck in this other dimension and they have to feed on energy. So they become they become morphed into the blood of man. So to stop this from happening, this is the crash of Atlantis, according to Thoth. He uses the Great Pyramid, builds the Great Pyramid, uses it to create a grid to cut off this rip in time and space from these creatures, lower dimensional beings coming into this reality, thus cutting us off from our potentiality, our eternal nature. So I think at first it was a protective measure for us as
Hmm.
souls, but we started to really believe that we were less than what we were because we could use our powers and it was hard to connect to with our eternal selves. And I think that this became our reality. We slowly, and then from spirituality it became religion, right? And then religion, it was thoughts and it was fears, and if we do this then everything will be okay. And where does that come from? In ancient times it seems like that wasn't the case. There was definitely gods and goddesses, but it wasn't a it it wasn't so dire as it is now. It's like we slowly devolved into what we are today, which is our limited beliefs, our limited understanding of how the universe works. And that is what we need to change, our understanding of eternity, of
Sure.
ourselves.
Well, if Melissa Tittl was able to activate this mechanism, what would you do with it? Like, what would you experience? Like, what would you, where would you go?
Well, but that's a big responsibility. If I was actually able to access something that I have to be symbiotic with, I would use it to reprogram our grid, I guess. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know if I mean, I'm still my existence is here, but the purpose would be to lift the veil so everybody could live more in harmony, I guess.
Do you think when we
I think I
die,
would,
we like when we die, like what do you think happens? Like, do we merge back with that consciousness? Do we go on the other side of the grid? Like, I mean, I know obviously, do we have the answers? No, because we're still alive and here, right? Unless we had some
yeah.
crazy out of body experiences or some like totally,
I think we
awesome
do.
psychedelics, right?
I think we do. We're just kind of trapped getting back into these bodies here, right? I mean, I don't
So
know
a
about
circle,
you or
another
anybody listening.
circle of reincarnation, right?
Yep.
Like, what's the point of that? Is
Karma.
that really like a evolutionary device where it is powered by karma, or is it a trap, by these lower beings?
Well, I think karma is the trap. Like the fact that you did something in a past life and then now you're being cursed by it. That's just the shadows on the wall. That's just you living in fear that there's something you did and you're wrong, right? That's that whole programming of like, an angry God is mad at you and now you're in trouble? Um, so that's part of the trap. The samsara wheel is kind of like our souls are kind of, even if you meditate a lot or there's people that channel, like they still got to come back to their bodies. They still got to come back to this reality. They're kind of stuck here. And I think when you die, you get to see that. You get to see all of it. And then we forget, right? You're like, okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to tell people something. And then you go back and you forget it. You're like, oh man. my mom and dad, and I didn't get that thing, and and then it just escalates. And then you're 40 years old and you're like, wow,
I didn't get
I
that
gotta go to therapy.
PlayStation 5 when I
I know
was,
my parents hate me.
yeah. What do you think true freedom is, right? Like being here as a human being. Like what is true freedom for you?
Happiness.
Hmm.
I mean, it doesn't matter how much money you have or how much you get to say. If you're not happy doing it, it's just another prison.
Sure. So you weren't happy making cookies?
No, not as happy as I am making.
Making movies and documentaries. I
Yeah,
have to agree
yeah,
with you.
yeah. It just, it really was. It was like, okay, that was kind of fun for a while.
So it's just to give some people context, like once you left, like I guess traditional Hollywood, you went and did cookies for a while, and then you went
Yeah.
into you created your own business and started making content that you really cared about.
Yeah, cookies. That's such a funny so I had left Paramount Studios, I think, at that point. No, and then I went to worked for the History Channel, and then I left. And then for some in between there, I had just been like, I am over these people. I'm gonna and I had all these contacts in Hollywood and they love gifts and they pay a lot of money for gifts. So I created this cookie company for my grandmother's recipes, and it was like pinup girls, and I had all these contacts, and I did really well. But I was in a kitchen baking all the time, and I was like, okay, my business is expanding. This is good, and I got like a psychic reading. This is really funny. I said, okay, so what do you think? How's this business doing? She's like, oh, you're not going to be doing this very long. I'm like, why? She's like, you're going to get offered a producing gig and you're going to take it. And you're just not going to want to put all this effort into this business. And I'm like, that is ridiculous. I'm done. I'm making cookies. Literally 2 weeks later, I got a call from what is now Ancient Aliens. And they said, hey, we really want you on this project. And I was like, well, what's it about? And I thought, wow, that's kind of fascinating. Never went back. Never went back. But yeah.
Yeah. I think that's so fascinating because, like, how did you know, right? Like, that you would be interested in that? Like, it just ancient aliens. Yeah, I could do that, right? Like, that's totally outside the cookie business. I think, you talked about your childhood and being a little bit more open than most and not really having a dogma that you were associated with. But like ancient aliens, where did you haven't had an experience with any aliens or UFOs, but like what's the draw there for you? Is it just the unknown? Like what is it truly? Is there really cover-ups? Like what's the stories? I guess the thrill of like understanding something that a lot of people have been researching for a really long time.
Yeah. Um, what's the draw? I don't know. I think all the answers
Well, let me
are
ask you this.
all
Is
the
do you
answers are
think
in the unknown.
yeah, well, do you think they are extraterrestrial or interdimensional?
Interdimensional.
Really?